Thanks again for rejoining us on the program this morning on ITV. And if you've been with us all the way from 7 a.m. when this show started today, thank you so much for staying with us on the program. Well, in 2017, two eminent scholars, Professor Pat Utomi, Professor of Political Economy, and of course, former CBN Governor, Professor Charles Soludo, came up to say that one of the biggest challenges that we have as a people and as a country is the existence of weak institutions, and that seems to be the bane of development. At the time, Nigeria was passing through a very traumatic time with the recession in full-blown stage. But we know that from available statistics and information, we've since gone past that stage. But it still looks like the effect of the recession, the scars of recession, they are still there. So today on the program, we're focusing on the governance impact in terms of policies and programs, but the key challenge is the presence of weak institutions. We have in the studio erudite analysts. Let me welcome very specially my good friend Fred Uyigwe. Is a development economist. He's also a politician. Fred, many thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Good morning to you viewers.
Well, we like to call him the living legend because of his extensive work in the civil society movement and public advocacy and all of that. He's executive director of Foundation for Good Governance and Social Change, Comrade Austin Osakwe. Comrade, many thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Good to be back.
Where have you been? I mean, last time I saw you was about a year ago, so let me say Happy New Year to you.
Thank you very much. I wish you the same.
Okay, we're also expecting David Ogolo, the executive director of African Network for Environment and Economic Justice, to join this conversation. But we get on, as we always do, the show must go on. Let me start with you, Fred. What constitutes institutions of governance?
Okay. Institutions are those agencies, okay, that are established to further the programs and projects of the government.
Okay.
And also they are designed to coordinate for synergistic development of all the players, both private institutions and public institutions. They have to be able to synergize and interface. So those agencies that are established to further such causes are those institutions.
Okay.
And such institutions, I must add, must have the ability to monitor, to measure, first monitor that is activities going on, to make sure that they are in line with the vision or mission of programs set up, and then they have to also be able to measure the performance and have the capability of making adjustments.
All right, Comrade, in line with the definition, do these institutions exist in Nigeria?
Yeah, they exist in all societies. The problem really is not the existence, it is the use to which they are put. And the fact that, first and foremost, let's look at government first as individuals and government as an institution. As individuals, we are talking of persons, men and women, young people inclusive, who have been entrusted with the mandate to manage the affairs of state on behalf of the generality of the people. But government as an institution, first we break it down to three, the traditional arms of government. The executive, which implements laws made by the legislature, which makes laws, and of course we have the judiciary that interprets laws and apportions blame to lawbreakers. For these three traditional arms of government to be alive to their responsibility, they further devolve to agencies under them. These are the things we call institutions. For instance, everybody talks about president, talk about governor, talk about minister, talk about commissioners and all of that. But there are government agencies that are there under them to ensure the day-to-day implementation of policies and decisions. Ditto for the legislature and the judiciary. But the focus usually is on the executive because they are the ones who translate all of these decisions, these policies, into actual contact with the people in terms of provisions for their welfare. Government, when we talk of governance generally, good governance, so to say, we're actually talking about effective public service delivery in an atmosphere of transparency and accountability. So when you say, are these agencies there? Are these institutions there? Of course they are there. We recognize, for instance, that there are courts. They are there. We recognize that there are ministries, what they call MDAs now, ministries, departments, agencies. There are parastatals. They're all there. The question really is this: do we defer to government as individuals or defer to government as institutions? This is what the marked difference between advanced societies and the less developed society. We like to see Nigeria as a developing society. We haven't gotten there.
Okay.
I have said before that we have all had the opportunity of traveling to other climes. We were just discussing now how that it took quite a long time to get from between the city center and Ogbawo here, local here. The fundamental is that roads need to be done, and they are being done. We commend the effort of those who are doing them. But there is a fundamental question of how, when. These are fundamental issues. So it is being done is a person focus. How it is being done and when it is being done is transferred to the institution. For instance, what is the level of communication between the agencies, these institutions, and the people who are supposed to benefit from their work? When is this work to be done? What is the consideration? Over there, it is to do the most minimum of discomfort to the people. Over here, it is individuals trying to show that we are working.
You feel the brunt?
Are you getting the point?
Yeah.
So where institutions are in the forefront in one climb, individuals are in the forefront in another climb. I'll give you another example. You are driving, and I've had this. I thought, you know, sir, that 40 miles per hour in the general US area, okay? 70 miles per hour on the highways. But I discovered to my chagrin that on the school road, the 40 falls down to 30. So I was driving and I heard, what have I done now? And I stopped. The point is, how does the average policeman in the state of Texas deal with me, a Nigerian who visited?
Yeah.
As opposed to how a Nigerian policeman deals with me, a Nigerian resident here.
Yeah.
Whereas that one believes that there is need to give me the benefit of the doubt.
Since you're new, or maybe you're a foreigner.
This one here believes ab initio is, in fact, when he's looking at me, is what can I get from it? So the emphasis is not on the functionality of the institutions.
Okay.
So essentially, government is participatory, ought to be participatory.
But
in
it's
fact, where we are now globally, it's no longer, good governance is no longer enough. It's now participatory good governance. That's why, for instance, people would understand why a Muammar Gaddafi, who has made health free, education free,
all things free, all right, life, yeah.
Yet people were not satisfied.
They wanted him dead by all means.
Having gotten these things you say are free, we see them. A time will come, people begin to ask the question, wait a minute, what role are we playing in all of these?
All right, comrade, let me
Okay.
pause it there. Let me pause it there. Fred, I'd like to find out from you, why are institutions weak? Because that seems to be the crux of our discussion. What are those things that have made our institutions weak, incapacitated our institutions to be able to participate or perform their duties assigned and enshrined in the Constitution?
First, to be able to deduce what makes institutions weak, you have to think in terms of what makes institutions strong. Okay. First, the very laws or policies that set up institutions. You have to look at that. Every organization starts out with an idea. Okay. ITV was an idea in somebody's mind.
Yeah.
Then you set it up, and then you want to bring that idea into reality. So having laid the plans based on your ideas, then you begin to work out structures on how that idea will function, on how the plan will function. So you have to start from the laws establishing institutions. How strong are they? To what purpose are the laws enacted? We happen to be in a society where lawmakers, they think about laws to protect themselves more than the society, or instead of the society, forgetting that someday they might not be part of the lawmakers that they are today and will become part of that society. That's why you need to make laws that will benefit everybody equally, because you never know where you are going to fit into the whole system. Okay. It might not even be you fitting into the system. It might be somebody so close to you, a child, a brother, a sister, mother, father, or neighbor. So that's why you need to have those laws that will protect everybody. Then you have to now go into the quality, the expertise needed to run such institutions.
As a personnel now?
The personnel.
Okay.
So that's human resources. Are they capable to handle the demands, the obligations and responsibilities of such institutions? So you have to fit people in as needed. Having done that, you have to now also provide the equipment necessary, the tools necessary. Today, given the level of advancement, technological advancement we enjoy in the world today, it will not do you good to rely on your pen and paper alone.
Absolutely.
Today, you rely on your electronic gadgets, your cell phones, your computers, and all of that. Without those things, you are not going to function at the level you are supposed to function. So the ability to organize, the ability to marry all these parts together, it's what makes institutions strong. And the absence of any of these will make the institutions weak. And the more of those things that should be there that are not there, the weaker the institutions will be. So it's just that simple. What we have in our country, it's very sadly, it's a situation where we have round pegs in square holes and square pegs in round holes, meaning that we have people who are not necessarily qualified to handle or to head organizations or institutions doing so. I want to see it as a lack of proper appreciation of the essence of having those who are qualified head institutions for which they have expertise,
Have the capacity
for which they have capacity and capability.
Okay, let me pause it there. Comrade, what are your thoughts on the thinking that in Nigeria we have over politicization of the duties and responsibilities of these institutions, and that seems to be one of the greatest challenges bedeviling them, leading to weakness and incapacity to perform and deliver on the terms of references?
People create institutions. Institutions are created by people. That's why, for instance, you had an Ibrahim Babangida who created a plethora of institutions. DIFRI, MAMSA, name them, all of them. Set up political parties. People create institutions. So when institutions fail to work, it is a human element. for what reason do you create an institution? The ideal thing is that when people create institutions, they bring up an enabling law to guide the operations of that institution. And they detach themselves. The people who create institutions want to be, they subsume themselves under these institutions, not to stay above the institutions. And I'll tell you this, the moment people believe that they can get away with an error, they will continue to perpetrate the error and even expand the frontiers of those errors. What is happening in Nigeria is that whereas there are institutions, we as Nigerians, and it's beyond rulership, we as Nigerians have not resolved to allow institutions work. Look, when people fall foul of the law, do they submit themselves to the process of law? Or do they want to cut corners to beat the law? Bible says a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. The moment one man can operate outside the law, it creates a valve, creates a room for other people to want to operate outside the law. So these institutions work elsewhere because the people are subject to institutions. But here, we create institutions and deliberately embed in them escape valves for strong individuals. That's why one of the prominent visitors who came calling said, in Nigeria, you have strong people and weak institutions because people place themselves above the institutions. That's one. The second is that, and it's good that you have linked it with governance impacts, our institutions are made to bite more than they can chew. I am a strong advocate of small governments. I believe that the center is too huge. It's a leviathan. The center is too huge. Education has a whole lot to play in making institutions work. You will find that in societies where the average literacy level is higher, institutions work better. Where literacy level is low, institutions are in trouble. And the reason is simple. You need education to be able to, education gives refinement. I define education as an army that liberates the mind. As long as the minds of the people is such that they want to cut corners, they want to beat the rules, institutions won't work. And I'll give you an example. You set up traffic lights across the place. It's not technology.
It is.
So that you don't need traffic wardens. You drive elsewhere now. The traffic lights are there. It is taken for granted. That's why when you are moving, you are crossing, you don't slow down. You are speeding because you just take for granted that you are the only one who has been cleared to pass. But in Nigeria, you still slow down when you see the traffic light. Haven't you seen Nigerians hurl insults at you when you stop before a red light? Yeah. And they begin to ask you all kinds of questions. You dey fear? You know where you dey go? What are you waiting for? A friend of mine came in from Berlin. He was driving about 7 in the evening. And he said he stopped by a traffic light. The people with him, family members, were telling him, you won't go, they will steal your vehicle. They will pounce on you here now.
By the traffic light.
That's the understanding. So what has happened is that the people themselves have not been so educated, both formally and informally, to appreciate that when institutions are allowed to work, it works for our own benefit. Okay. So it's a people thing. We need to invest in education. Education must be seen, it's not funding of education. It must be seen as an investment, a massive one for the future. Why do we spend so much money on adult education when it's easier to just ensure that every child goes to school?
At that elementary level.
Yes, and get it right, get everybody on board. So we miss, and my elder brother here has talked about square pegs in round holes. That's exactly the focus, and that's the result of this poor education. Because if we believe that the responsibility I have as a managing director is to get my family members and friends into positions, we have sacrificed merit already. The man over there in this advanced that I will keep pointing at, they are not too far from us anymore.
No.
Because we cannot point at Rwanda, we can point at Malawi, we are even pointing at Tanzania now. Some are pointing at Ghana. The people have resolved that things will work. Closely tie education to this. You know, Nigerian parents now take their children to Ghana to school. They pay so much, and I am wondering, Ghana, we are taking our children to school there. Is it that their teachers are better than us? Is it that the schools are better? No, really. If you go into a school in Ghana, they are sure that the certificate you bring out at the end is not a product of copying in the exam hall. The schools are made to work.
Or examination malpractice.
But here, we are no longer sure. People bring out certificates, they can't defend them. I understand one of the banks had 13 coppers, and they were screening them. Only 2 were able to spare coppers. But they are university graduates. So it brings us back to it. Yeah. The institutions are not working because we as a people have not allowed them to work. I'll give you an example, sir. We have a federal government, we have state governments, we have local governments. For me, the one that ought to be the most important is the local government. Municipal, look, there are countries in which you never get to see the governor.
Yeah.
You don't know who the governor is. Even when he appears on television, it's for a few seconds. Yeah. The government that fixes your roads, the government you can pick a phone and call and say, look, there is a flooding in my area.
At the municipal level.
At the municipal level. That's the most important to the people. But here, we heap everything at the center. And so what do? The states, the local governments, everybody goes to meet the center to collect peanuts that fall from there. And now I'm asking, why do we have a federal ministry of agriculture? Which land are they practicing the agriculture? Who are they making the policies for? Agriculture should be at state and local government level. Ideally.
Okay. Let me
so we are getting to a point where one day we just see a signboard, a barbing salon belonging to the federal government. We're getting there. Government ought to be getting smaller, but in Nigeria, it's getting bigger.
All right, let me pause it there. If you just join us, it's still TMI Thursday. Our conversations on the show this beautiful Thursday morning, impacts of governance and the challenges of weak institutions in Nigeria. We'll take another pause, and one of our panelists will be joining us in a bit. Stay with us.
TMI, every opinion counts.
Thanks again for staying with us on the program TMI Thursday. Joining us now is the Executive Director, African Network for Environment and Economic Justice, Reverend David Ogolo. Reverend Ogolo, thanks for joining us on the program.
Thank you, Mr. Son.
Okay, the conversations on weak institutions and its impact on governance in Nigeria has been on full throttle in the last couple of minutes. But I'd like to get your thoughts on the results that you get when institutions are weak, using Nigeria as a case study. Maybe with reference to INEC and its performances, the fight against corruption, and several other institutions that we have in place in Nigeria. What are your thoughts?
Thank you very much. Again, I want to apologize for coming.
It's okay. Part of the things we talked about before you got here.
Yes. First, I think it's an agreed principle that in research and empirical evidence that the relationship between governance and corruption is a huge problem in this part of the world, particularly the developing country. And Nigeria is a classical case where you have the weak institution and the manifestation you see in everyday life. Things are not working the way we would have expected. TI, Transparency International, just released their 2020 annual CPI report. Just trending now. And one of the key elements that has come out from this report is that country where big money move freely into election, you expect that there is a weak institution and that things doesn't work as one would have expected. This is a country where you have an individual is able to carry a bullion van into his house, nothing happens. This is a country where you see an individual puts huge amount of money in his house, so it moves freely. And so this report again re-emphasized the fact that institutions, when they are weak, things can happen in a way that doesn't support democracy, doesn't support strong development. And so the relationship between weak governance and poor development is clear. And to say that Nigeria is a case, you can easily see the example around. And one key area is what we are seeing in the election process. And then that again also impacts negatively on the judicial system. And once you have these institutions that are supposed to be the pillar for strong democratic values, then the implication is that it impacts on the people's livelihood and even human development. Capital is undermined because it again points to the fact that the common man, the spending of the government also reflects the pattern of a state capture. And Nigeria is a very classical case of this, because when you say weak institution, what does it really mean to the common man on the street? The common man on the street will understand this very well. When they go to the hospital, they don't get drug, they don't get the treatment they would have expected. When they go to the school, they don't get the expected quality of teaching that they would have expected. And when they need government services, they have to pay bribe to get it. And this is really what we mean by weak institution, because if the institutions are strong, government services will be delivered very efficiently and perfectly. And that's why you found out that we say that Nigeria is a classical case for this. Unfortunately, the real key challenge is that those who are in authority, who would have expected that things will be functioning very well, are not also using these services. Their children are in abroad. They don't go to the hospitals here. I'm sure that when you look around the entire country today, few governors goes to the public hospital, and few governors' children are in the public school, and few governors are able to patronize our own system here. They have two citizenship. And so when you have this kind of characters running the country, this is the challenge that we face in the country. And this is really the real problem.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's look at something. Someone said to me a few days ago that in Nigeria, we're having a situation wherein the coming into office by any individual is supposed to be decided by the people who will go to the polling units. They cast their votes, and after voting, results are announced, and then this is the winner. But it doesn't stop there. It may eventually get to either the High Court, the Appeal Court, and then finally the Supreme Court. So it's like a case of the relevance of the electorate is winning, and the court seems to be taking preeminence in determining who becomes what, even after an election is won and is lost. Is this a fallout of weak institutions? Let me begin with you.
See, in this country, we seem to be living in self-denial of things that are obvious to us. We have very capable minds in Nigeria, experts, if not resident in Nigeria, in the diaspora, but they are Nigerians, committed to Nigeria. So, when we have problems with our institutions, using INEC for example, it is because of the kind of people we have running such institutions, or we had designing such institutions. A major slogan or caption of technology is garbage in, garbage out. I am an apostle of quality planning. If you are going to have a strong institution, you must devote a lot of time to quality planning. Okay. Take for example, let's just take a small example of an exhibition of weakness in our own planning systems. When I think it was in 1979, we had our election, okay? And then Shagari won by 12 2/3 majority. And the two parties at the time went to court, spent over 3 months in court, and tens of millions of naira prosecuting that case, trying to determine that case. Whether 12 2/3 qualified to be 2/3 majority. But do you know the American Constitution, if not the Constitution, there are laws, okay, settles that issue very simply with just 2 words. 2/3 majority or of the states, 2/3 of the states or 34 states, just or 34. And that would have saved us if we had done just that. We had Nigerian professionals. So when those in the developed nations look at us, they think that we are intellectually lazy, because we studied their documents to frame our document, and we could not even catch something so fundamental and so critical. 2 words or 34.
That would have
in our own case,
saved us the trouble.
yes, it would have saved us the time to litigate all of that.
Okay.
And in our own case, it would have been 2/3 of the states or 13 states. Simple. But like you said, like Mr. Sarko said, when our framers, our designers, when they design our policies and laws, they create loopholes deliberately, believing that they will be there to take advantage of it. And in many cases, they are not there to take advantage of it.
It becomes a problem for the
And
system.
it becomes a problem for the entire society. They create all kinds of loopholes, and they embed all kinds of, So that's a problem. In our own case, we must take time to design the parameters of our institutions. Those checks and balances. If you have strong checks and balances, you cannot abuse the institutions, because if it doesn't catch up with you while you are in office, when you leave office, it can catch up with you.
Okay, let me proceed there and bring Austin Mr. in. I mean, in line with the last question that I asked, where the power to decide is gradually waning and is going to the courts. Let's interface that with the current situation we have with INEC, ICPC, and EFCC as institutions of governance. Let's get your thoughts.
Now, it takes us back to the statement I had made. Institutions don't fall from the sky. Individuals create the institutions. Individuals also deliberately go out of their way to strengthen these institutions through laws, through policies, through pronouncements, through conventional practices. The reason why tomorrow is greater than today is that the mistakes of tomorrow can be corrected. The mistakes of today can be corrected tomorrow. But in Nigeria, we don't do that. Vested interests is what makes institutions weak. Vested interests. And the fact that the criminal justice system is horrible. Now, we have the Nigerian police. Ordinarily, people will have felt that there was no need for ICPC and EFCC. But it got to a point where we discovered that the police were not equipped to tackle the plethora of crimes, especially the new emerging crimes, as we develop in quote. So EFCC came. Money laundering, financial crimes, economic crimes. So we had the EFCC. In the same way, we had ICPC. In fact, people have a problem distinguishing between what the EFCC does and what the ICPC does. Because in very many situations, we find that similar cases are taken to both institutions. But the law is very clear on what EFCC should be doing and what ICPC should be doing. But look at from the foundation of the EFCC, particularly the EFCC, perhaps because it was bolder in responding to the issues of corruption. But from the foundation, it has been dogged by criticisms of vested interests. It is either we are saying they are selective in prosecution of crimes, or that the people so appointed behave in a manner as if they are above the law, or that those who appointed officers into the place appointed those who will protect them and their cronies. Why is Nigeria a special country created by God outside other countries? A lot of these institutions work elsewhere, but they don't work here. It brings me back to what I said. Education here is a major factor. Haven't you seen situations where the same people you are fighting for, that you are taking risks for, so that their situation will be better? They are the ones who fight you. They are the ones who come out to say, you are still not tired of this thing you have been doing. So there is a problem of lack of education. If we don't tackle that, because what education does is that it liberates the minds, and then it provides an opportunity for those who are in position of authority to mobilize the people and galvanize them towards a vision. We don't yet have that in Nigeria. My brother talked about quality minds in Nigeria. I agree entirely. Quality minds, especially in the diaspora, I agree entirely. But how many cases have you found that people came from that side with the track record that they have? They will come from there and come here and be able to fit into the system. I have not found any case. Most of the time they are frustrated out. Okay, what of the ones who are here? What is the recruitment process? I'm happy you talked about elections in Nigeria.
Support base.
INEC is a particular case. Let me say the electoral process is a particular case of study for weak institutions and the failure of those in authority to do something about it. Do you know how much is budgeted for INEC in every election? In fact, all the time now, because we have staggered elections all over the place, we sink billions into doing the same thing again and again. No improvement. There was a time we carried that. We said it was card reader. Who's talking about card reader now? And so I have asked the question, and people have said, one easy way to have solved our electoral problems was to use technology. Other countries are using it. There are different stages until you get to one that is near foolproof. Nigerians have cried, let's go electronic. Let's at least start from somewhere towards electronic voting.
We did start from somewhere.
But nobody is doing anything about that, because the people who vie for election,
Who hope to benefit.
It's the ruling class. The people who hope to benefit from this rough system will never want the right thing to be done.
Okay,
True, sir.
Yes.
And this is important because Reverend David Ugolo was talking about the ease with which people commit crimes, the ease with which we move money around. Does it not bother you that there are laws on electoral offenses?
Your voice is so low now talking about
But this is serious. It weighs on me. There are a plethora of electoral offenses. I don't see prosecution. I don't see people paying for it. When people know they can get away with crime, they will continue to perpetrate the crime. We see incidents of it every day. In this country, sir, in one of the elections not too long ago, government made provisions for generator for registration of voters.
Yes.
And they said in Edo State, for instance, we have 192 wards. They said they were going to provide at least one generator for a ward.
And we saw those generators. You saw them.
You saw them?
I'm asking.
You forgot that I raised the issue that we didn't see generators. Communities were the one bringing out their generators. But money was budgeted. As we speak, civil society shouted hoarse. Their voice went hoarse. Nobody fingered anybody as being the custodian of the money that was supposed to be used to buy generators.
Okay.
Generators were provided for. They were not bought. The process was in shambles. They had to extend the time again and again because there was nobody held anybody responsible.
Accountability, that's what you're talking about.
Transparency, accountability that translates into effective public service delivery.
Let me pause it there, comrade.
One generator.
Reverend Ogolo, I've heard instances where civil society people talk about efforts to help these existing institutions strengthened so that they'll be able to deliver on their terms of reference. What are your thoughts on the level of reception by those in position of authority to allow this strengthening, either by way of training, workshops, seminars, and stuff like that? What are your thoughts?
I think that's what Comrade Oksakwe rightly noted, and I think that's again what my colleague here also re-emphasized. First, in trying to tackle the challenge of governance and corruption, there are quite a number of theories that has been put in place that form the basis of the intervention. For instance, in tackling very systemic corruptions across developing country, you have this principal agency framework where people expect that the principal will be a responsible person that you can trust, because obviously what happens is that the agent takes an advantage of information asymmetry between the principal and the agent. The people do not even know whether this money that the principal uses belongs to them. And so the challenge for civil society, you expect the principal, the government, you want the government, for instance, to come and train civil society, train the people, create an education that will empower the people to be able to answer the right question. You won't get that from them. I think the people themselves must take the responsibility. I have since moved away from we against them. The reason obviously is that we will continue in this paradigm if we continue we against them. What I mean is that the people that are governors, the people that are members of the judiciary, they are not from the blue moon. They are our brothers, they are our sisters. They are our people. And the way the system works is that essentially there's complicity from every sector. Okay. And because of this, we must begin to look for a way to solve the problem, because emphasis on the problem will not take us anywhere any longer. Because now, what are the opportunities that are opening? So we must be piloting success story. Like for example, let's point to the success story. People, because there is no really one magic way to measure success in terms of governance and corruption, because it's a very problematic thing. People, when you say the system is corrupt, to measure it is a very big problem. Even in Transparency International Corruption Perception Index, is a very problematic one. And so it's just a perception, so it doesn't really measure what the level of corruption is actually happening. And as a matter of fact, it's an emphasis on just one public sector corruption. So what can we do to turn this story around? There is already success story, and those success stories will identify them and scale them up. I give you an example. Across the Niger Delta, we've been working in this region for more than 20 years. We have seen there are some success stories, and we must begin to point those success stories and see how we scaled it up. Now, if you look and watch and gather the data on public speaking, public agitation, level of civil society awareness, Edo State is #1 across the region. And when you see the basis of that and the implication of that, level of governance in Edo State is more improved compared to other states. Even I'm from Delta State. You cannot compare the level of governance in Edo State with Delta State. And the obvious difference are what are those things that are responsible? Because you have the ITV, you have different public speaking arena in Benin, and when the people speak, you can't see government not being able to respond. And so the level of governance in terms of how citizens raise an issue, and you can see the level of awareness of citizenship in Edo State, you cannot compare it to Delta State. And so are there opportunity to scale this up? Yeah, there are opportunity. So when you identify such a kind of success story, you can scale them up and begin to engage. Are there opportunity at the national level? Yes. Let me assure you that in terms of how things are functioning, there are little opening space for improvement. In 2004 and 2005, I was fortunate to lead the first civil society intervention in Nigeria, and that was the first pilot case in Africa. where stolen money kept in Switzerland, about $480 million of Abacha's money was returned back to Nigeria. I went out with 10 leading civil society in the country and 10 key government officials across the country. We monitor how those money was used in Nigeria. There are projects that then, under Obasanjo, told Nigerians that they used those money to build. We found out that those money were missing. Those money were not used. Between 2004 and 2018 or 2017, we were in Washington when the Swiss government and Nigerian government and World Bank signed an MOU for a new tranche of money to return back to Nigeria, which is $322.5 million. And now this is a huge amount of money taken by one single individual, kept in Switzerland Bank, and the money returned back to Nigeria. Now, what has happened in Nigeria? We designed a framework where citizens will keep an eye on how government is going to spend that money. They were going to use it for social investment program. We work closely with the World Bank, work closely with the federal government. As I speak to you, the money is going across the entire state. I think Edo State have just signed on to the process now. Money are going to the very poor and the poorest in Nigeria.
Is this money actually going to these people?
I can confirm to you, I've been on the feed for the last 1 year with over 700 citizens monitoring, keep an eye. And government have opened up their space for us to have an intervention, have the money move right away for Central Bank. Is it a classical case of where there's an entry point? Yes. Is it an opportunity for strengthening governance? Yes. Is it an opportunity to tackle grand corruption? Yes. Now, how do we scale this up? Because if we pay much attention on what is not working too much, and we don't pay attention to what is working and scale it up, we will still be talking about in the 60s. And then there will be no opportunity to build fences, and that's what I thought the benefit of tackling corruption, the benefit of tackling poor governance system. Because if you don't energize the process and incentivize the movement, and to begin to see their success story, like for example, I can confirm to you that the level of governance and the level of citizen awareness in Edo State is extremely high compared to other states in Nigeria. And because of that, you need to encourage and incentivize. Are there improvement within the citizenship? There are improvements. For example, the way you try to do civil society work in the 70s, in the 80s, you can't do it now and succeed. For example, as a journalist, if you want to begin to write, for example, Obaseki said, or you are a civil society, you said, you know, your engagement need to improve.
So we need to upgrade, we need to scale up. All right, let me pause it there. We're just on the verge of concluding this discussion. But I'd like to get thoughts on the place of policies and the place of institution in terms of strength and weaknesses to help to deepen or engender good governance. The reason I say this is that sometimes it looks like you have a good policy, but the institution carrying out or executing that policy doesn't have the capacity to deliver. So what's your take on this? Let me start with you, Fred.
First, let me just say that the position Mr. Golo has taken is quite appreciable, because the concern of many of us, it's the ability to sustain improvements and advances in developments. So to answer your question, we have to have an understanding as to how instruments affect productivity. First, you're talking about the laws. Laws are at the apex. Usually, we say federal government makes laws, state governments statutes. Then you devolve down to private sectors that make bylaws. Okay, so from the laws, it is from the laws that you make policies. So if the laws are faulty, your policies will be faulty. Your policies are hinged on the laws that have been made. And like Sakwe rightly said, where there is a problem with those who are making laws, building in escape valves, building in stuff to be able to benefit them personally, then you are going to have weak policies because the laws themselves are bad. But again, if you have those who are actually qualified, I'll tell you, for example, in the United States, there is this body of laws called UCC, Uniform Commercial Codes. The Uniform Commercial Codes, it's a body of laws designed to regulate business transactions across the United States. So everybody defers to UCC, not the Constitution this time and all of that, because that one details exactly what the relationship between transactors are. So that is what we need here. We need to be able to review some of our laws. We need to sponsor, I will say. When I say we, the federal government, the state government for state laws and all of that, you need to revisit your laws from time to time. Besides the judicial reviews that you have and other laws, you need to be able to sit down or sponsor a review of laws so that the policies that will come out from those laws too will be strong enough to be able to guide and safeguard the institutions.
Okay, all right, Comrade Austin Sakwe, let's quickly be on the dissent now as we conclude our conversations on this issue. What's your take on what we need to do to strengthen our institutions for them to be more efficient and effective?
I think that first and foremost, and I made the point, Nigeria must be taken as a country in which large size won't do it. First, because there's a lot of things that divide us, and over time we are focused on these divisions. What will work in Edo may not work in Kano. That's the truth. Because there'll be, look, something as simple as immunization has been politicized in this country. There are states where people feel that immunization, up till now in 2020, they feel immunization is a way to reduce population. When you have that, the smaller the better. Reverend David Golo talked about how that over time, Edo State has gone up in terms of responsiveness of government to demands of the people, because the pressure has been consistent. This cannot be said of many other states.
Absolutely.
So what you do, therefore, and I'm hoping that in the near future, the basis for competition will be at state level, down to local government level. When a state excels so well, other states want to take a cue.
Exactly.
But we are concentrating too much in the center, so that institutions that are geared towards implementing policies will be doing so with clear policy guidelines, not guidelines that when they become too large, they become subject to misconstruction. We'll be very clear on what we want to do. David was one of those, along with others, that spearheaded the procurement policies. That's a very crucial one. Unfortunately, the reason we are still bogged down with so much corruption inside government purchases is that whereas the law is there has not been enough done to ensure that people comply with the law. And that's why across the world there is a cry for increased independence of the judiciary. When people believe they can break the law and get away with it, they will continue to do it. That's impunity. Exactly. So, strengthening institutions, you must ensure that the so-called equality before the law, the rule of law, is such that it is real. It's not something we just mouth. Okay. Two, we talk of a federal system. You know, when it favors a certain level of government, it talks about federalism.
Yes.
When it doesn't favor it, they tell you that you have not domesticated this, you have not domesticated that. So we need to get it clear.
Okay.
Competition must be at small levels of governance, and the institutions operating therein are easier to strengthen.
Okay, let's take a break here. We'll be back to quality wrap on this discussion with our other two panelists, giving us their final words on governance impact and the challenges of weak institutions in Nigeria. It's still TMI with yours sincerely, Sonny Duke Okosu. We'll be right back.
TMI, every opinion counts.
Okay, we conclude the show now because we just on the last lap of TMI Thursday. Let's get final thoughts from two of our panelists, and that will be it for today. We've got David Ogolo. Yeah, weak institutions and its impacts on good governance. What's your final take?
Well, like I said, I think there's enough now. Lamentation won't take us anywhere. Bad governance, corrupt systems, state capture, good analysis. It forms a very good background. But as I said, we have shifted away from there, looking to what is working.
Okay.
And if you identify what is working, can we scale it up? And if we scale it up, can it become an example that others can follow? Yes, it can. Well, has that been happening in Nigeria? It has been happening.
Okay.
And as we speak now, like I said, I gave a story of what happened in 2004 and what is happening in 2018 and 2019. It shows clearly that civil society can show example of what works. For example, in Edo State, what can civil society do to change the story? And I feel very strongly civil society should strengthen their capacity of engagement. And the tools that they use in engagement need to be strengthened and be capacitated in a way that they take notice of how government functions. And once that happens, we must look for a technique that happens. For example, today, corrupt politicians can't have an entry into the United States because of a new policy put in place. And civil society in Nigeria can work with civil society in America to ensure that corrupt politicians that operate in Nigeria don't have access to those places. And as we speak now, we're coming up with a very broad initiative. And what's the initiative? We're taking data of children of politically exposed persons in Nigeria across the world. So that's why I'm saying that the way we fight corruption is not what it was 10 years ago. There are software to classically track who is stealing in Nigeria. And the evidence of stealing is obvious everywhere. And so, how do we do this? It's by collaboration. It's about identifying success story, scale it up, and then looking the issue of evidence-based policy advocacy, no speculation. So we can use those evidence to engage government and use those evidence to change policy. Classically, we can be achieving a result. And then the vehicle for governance in Nigeria are failing, the political party. They are not, the political parties in Nigeria are instrument in the hands of political elite. It doesn't provide opportunity for citizens to advance change. So the only hope for the future is citizen, is the common people on the street. And that's why I said in Edo State there is an opportunity to do that. And if the citizens can build fences with the media, what ITV is doing, providing opportunity for public discussion, you galvanize the people, I tell you, the people will be there.
All right, Freddie, final take.
Well, first and foremost, we cannot run away from the fundamentals. Okay?
And what are those fundamentals?
Fundamentals such as the ability to identify people, your citizens, your very basics for planning. The national ID, I think, like Osakwe has said, putting that under the umbrella of the federal government, it's a mistake. In other climes, United States, I will use as an example, IDs are based on state-by-state basis. Every state knows the citizens of its states.
Yeah.
We first need to be able to identify our people, to help you to plan. And that is what is going to help you to track people. And the reason I brought this about is that, for example, employees that underperform, employees that are criminal in nature can be tracked. There's Better Business Bureau that provides information to businesses, business to business. And if you went to apply for a job in the United States and you got one, or you were being considered for one, you are going to list references, and they are going to call your previous jobs
to find out your record in those offices.
Yes,
or
what you
businesses.
did, what you did.
Yes.
You know, and they are going to ask your permission whether they should call. And if you are bold, you are sure of your performance, then you tell them to call.
Yeah.
And so if you cannot find out the credibility of an employee, a worker, then you take a risk each time you employ a worker. We cannot keep running around in circles. But if we must move forward, we must develop templates for measuring productivity, for measuring development, for measuring advancements. Templates that can be used generally. You cannot have an institution and then, like often is the case here, a representative of that institution comes up and says, oh, well, do you know what we have been doing? And he cites one example that is just one of 1,000 and says, that's how well we have been doing. And you want me to take that? Give me a complete picture, an overview of what you have been doing, using templates to measure performance. And is the template, is the performance that you have measured, that you are going to compare to what you have done, what you plan to do, and how you need to get there.
All right, this will now be final take. But I'd like you to look at it from the perspective of data in this whole gamut of discussion that we just had.
You see, there are politically advantageous investments and politically disadvantageous investments as far as politicians are concerned. You know, when you go to...
Don't start me on
If you go and put a building in the city center, it's a plus for government. People point at it. But the money spent on waste control, nobody sees it. That's where data is. And I like to say, one of the points that the present Edo State government has touted is that they really do not jump into a project without gathering data, without strategizing. And that's the future. You don't jump into a thing. Okay, yes, we have institutions all over the place. How many of them are based on accurate data? You know, in Nigeria is one place where we say, we just thought of ourselves, almost 90% of...
Exactly.
we say 82%, and then you wonder where they got those figures from. So the way forward, really, if we want our institutions to function well, data gathering is very crucial. And this is where I think government can work with civil society, the professionals, and even industry to begin to gather data as a basis for planning, for policy making, even for law making, and then for implementation.
Well, of course, you always get more than what you bargained for when you have the opportunity to bring guys like this to the studio for a conversation. Let me say big thanks to Comrade Austin Osakwe, Executive Director of Foundation for Good Governance and Social Change, as well as Fred Uyigwe. Fred Uyigwe is a former governorship aspirant, is a development economist. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
And of course, the erudite Reverend David Ogolo, Executive Director, African Network for Environment and Economic Justice. Many thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay, key factors have been identified for us to strengthen the institutions of government so that they can transmogrify from being weak to being strong institutions, so that we can have better deliverables in terms of governance impact. And so many things have been advanced, talking about education, talking about adequate training, data, and a host of others. We're hoping that we can embellish all of this into the things that we do. That way, it will be better for us in terms of ensuring that our institutions work better and then make better impact in terms of the lives of the people. Otherwise, all the things we'll be saying here will just be mere rhetorics. That's where we draw the curtains on the program today, TMI. We hope you had a great time with us. Be sure to join us tomorrow, Friday, but this time the language will be different because the trio of Thomas Sado, Emmanuel Akbololo, Victor Rio, and of course Hilary Musaudia will be here on Good Morning from Benin, which is the pidgin version of TMI. My name is Sonny Duke Okosun. Thank you for staying with us. Do have a great week ahead. Bye for now.